I am excited for my very first video in my series. I thought it would be fitting to have Ed Soph as my first guest. Ed was my mentor at North Texas and even after. He is an integral part, I believe, in my development as a musician. And I'm so excited to have him on here to talk about my experience at North Texas, what I got out of it, and also to give Ed a chance to maybe talk a little bit more about himself, his professional career, and maybe some insights into his personal life. So Ed, thank you so much for taking the time to talk with me today.
My pleasure. Thank you for asking.
Sure. So I want to jump right into this. So I attended North Texas in the mid 90s. I was there from fall of 94 to 98-ish. I had kind of tapered off. I was actually a transfer student. I went there my fourth year of college.
hmm
And in a way, I started over because the program being so rigorous. I still did 4 years, or maybe 3.5 years. I didn't have to do 4 years because I already had some prerequisites down.
hmm
But my decision to go to North Texas, excuse me, was partially based on the reputation of the school. At the time, I was in Portland, Oregon, and many of the professionals, the most successful professionals that I was meeting, excuse me, or I was hearing stories about, well, Woody Herman Band, Harry Connick, they pull guys out of North Texas. I also knew of you and just the opportunity to study with you. But then doing research, there was other elements about North Texas that stood out to me that I saw that other schools didn't offer. So I'm curious for you, with what you know about other college programs and people have gone through them, what would you say sets North Texas apart, or at least at that time, at different times, set North Texas apart from other schools? And how is it set up to foster an environment where it just produced such outstanding professionals who are out there in the world today on the scene? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think the main strength of the school back when you were there was that there were so many performance opportunities. And also being in Denton, Texas, which was not exactly the most exciting place to be in the world back then, there were very little in the way of distractions as there are in a larger metropolitan area. And so it was easy to focus on what you wanted to do in Denton because there wasn't much else to focus on. And that, plus the fact that the school did and still does draw highly talented individuals. And basically, the bottom line is, and I think it's still true, that if you played with the best instrumentalists at the school, you would probably do the same wherever you went.
Mm-hmm.
And if you networked with the best and played with the best there, then you'd probably do the same wherever you went. But obviously, to be a musician, it's not so much academic work as it is playing. And back then, the curriculum was not necessarily the music curriculum, but the other areas of study that you were required to take was not as demanding as it is now. I mean, it's really tough in this state because of all the other stuff they pile into the curriculum. It absolutely has nothing to do with preparing for your career. And it wasn't that way yet when you were in school. And yeah, I think that's pretty much it. And plus, every school didn't have a jazz program back then either. There were quite a few, but nothing like there is now. Every university or college has some sort of jazz program.
Yeah. For me at the time, I think that was the biggest draw because I knew I wanted to be a jazz musician. But really, the only options, at least in the Pacific Northwest where I'm from, was you could be a performance major, but it had to be in percussion.
Mm-hmm.
And the focus couldn't be on jazz. You could be in the jazz band. They might have had a jazz teacher on faculty for drum set, but you really couldn't make that your major focus. So
Right.
I was so excited that North Texas had that to offer. Again, I really want to talk about the environment of North Texas because I think it is very unique compared to what I know of other schools and what I experienced. When I was getting ready to go there and talking to people, they said, "Oh, you don't want to go there. There's so much competition. There's so many great players there."
Uh-huh.
And I would think, and that's a bad thing. Why? You think about, like you were saying, with such great players.
Yeah.
That's how you're going to learn to be great. If you're competing with someone who's demonstrating to you, you want to be at this level, this is what you have to do. And where I was, I had good programs, but I was at the top of the program. And I wasn't halfway where I wanted to be and needed to be. And I thought, I don't want to be somewhere where I'm the best.
Right.
I want to be where I can climb a ladder because I need to see what I need to do. I had good teachers, but I needed more challenge. And when I think about that statement about competition, yes, there's a lot of competition, but it's also met with opportunity. Some schools might only have one jazz band, two jazz bands, and there's competition, which means if you don't get in, then you're out of luck. You know, you're just stuck in your practice room. But at North Texas, at the time, I can't remember if the lab bands went up to 7 o'clock or 9 o'clock. I think it went up to 9 o'clock at that time.
9 o'clock lab band, yeah.
The top two bands had one rhythm section, and all the rest had two rhythm sections. So you might not get into the top band, but you still have opportunity to be placed where you're at and then grow from there.
Exactly.
And I really think that's vital.
Yeah.
Because some schools, unfortunately, it's like, well, that spot's taken, you know, you'll just have to try again. So that was wonderful. That was wonderful. Having lessons with you and then having the lab bands, it gave us an opportunity to then put into practice what you were teaching us.
Exactly. Yeah.
And if you don't have that opportunity, then you're just sitting in your practice room, you know, by yourself playing with Abersols. In addition to the lab band, I think about another transformative class that I took was Rhythm Section Master Class.
Yeah, that was a good class.
It was a wonderful class. It was being mentored by you and Fred Hamilton and Dan Hurley were the faculty. And us being split up into groups, performing for each other, getting that feedback. One of my favorite Ed Soph stories to tell. We got our little trio together, you assigned us in trios, and the three of us all listened to the same cats, and we loved playing the same thing. And so we thought, okay, our first song is going to be Days of Wine and Roses, a la Ray Brown Trio. And we played it just like the recording. And you were like, that sucked. I said, why? You said, you know, you're not showing us how you play. You're showing us how Ray Brown Trio plays it.
Yeah.
And you really, really challenged us. You said, this class is about finding your sound, you know, creating music. And the joke is, you know, by the end of the semester, we took it to heart. We took it probably to the extreme the wrong way. But we went for it. And I remember our last performance, Fred Hamilton said, yeah, you guys have really just developed your own sound. And you said, it's not a good one, but it's your own sound. So, anyways, I get a chuckle at the, you know,
that
sounds like something you'd say.
That was a good class. You would, you figured everybody was in there for the same thing to become a better musician. So we didn't sugarcoat anything because it's not sugar-coated in the real world. So why sugarcoat it in formative years too?
Exactly. And it was another form of just, you know, analysis. Really thinking about what you're doing and a lot of discussion about that. So there was that class. And of course, with percussion, the drum set majors, we did all of the percussion instruments. And we had our methods class where we learned our Stone, Gladstone, and Moeller. And what was great about that is that was intensive study, but it also freed you up to then focus on the drum set. You didn't have to spend time introducing all these snare drum techniques and movement and all that. It would be brought up, And I can remember you would do check-ins on me. You'd say, so what's going on in methods class? Oh, why
Mhm.
don't you show me what you're doing? And then you'd give me feedback and show me, well, maybe you should think about doing this.
Mhm.
But that was another way for us to just really dig into jazz,
You know,
that
that's
drum set.
another strength of the program, and it's still a strength of the program, is that it's comprehensive.
Comprehensive, yes.
Yeah, and of course the cruel truth is that you only play the drum set as well as you play the snare drum.
Hmm.
And so the sticking techniques and all that was so important. And marimba, timpani, all of that, it all feeds into your drum set playing. For
Hmm.
sure. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And the auditions for the lab bands,
Hmm.
that alone is life experience.
Yeah, it's pretty harrowing.
Yeah, so I mean, I could talk to you about my experience, but I'm curious. So, talk about the process that you created or was created there for auditions for the drummers. I know the horn players kind of had their own thing,
Mhm.
but my first quarter there started off, I believe there were 75 drummers with their names on the sign up sheet.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
there was a detailed process, but tell us about that process. And I'm curious how instrumental you were in that. Was that your thing, or was that the whole school's approach? But
That was
drum set auditions for lab bands. Tell us about
yeah,
that.
the well, the first step was to see if a person could read.
Hmm.
And the second step was to see if they could read and interpret what they were reading, meaning playing dynamics on the page, um, seeing how a person would react if uh, something happened in the chart that they weren't prepared for. And what I would do is I'd frequently write a chart that would start out with brushes, go to sticks, and then on the DC, it would go back to the top to brushes. And if the auditionee had not scanned the chart, invariably after they played the first part with the brushes, they're so nervous that they just throw their brushes on the floor.
Hmm.
And when they got down to the DC, you see this look of fear in their face, and then some of them actually scrambled to try to get their brushes in the 4-bar break that was there. So that was another point. Primarily, one got a band audition if they could interpret the parts that they read. And of course, obviously, person had to keep relatively good time and have a balance on the kit where it sounded like one person playing the kit rather than 4 people playing the kit, the different appendages. Then they go to the band, and the one distinguishing factor that we looked for in the band, we meaning myself and the other faculty, was whether or not the drummer took charge. Whether if they were intimidated by the chart or intimidated by the band, they were probably not going to get in a band right away, or at least get in a lower band, perhaps.
Hmm.
We could tell what their skills were. Did they read ahead? If it said play 8 bars of time, did they keep their head buried in the chart while they played the 8 bars of time? Did they make the transition between full ensemble drummer and combo drummer when a soloist came up to play? Did they lead the band? They were playing, a soloist was playing, and they say the dynamic level was mezzo forte, and the ensemble came in 8 measures later, fortissimo. Did the drummer take the liberty and responsibility of leading the band in dynamically as well as rhythmically? In other words, crescendoing to bring the band in. And you could tell whether or not a drummer was reading from bar to bar or reading in phrases. Because when it would come time to that situation where the soloist was mezzo forte and the ensemble suddenly came in fortissimo, the person who was reading bar by bar would be shocked when the band came in loud, and they'd suddenly try to change their dynamic level. And in changing their dynamic level in such an erratic way, the time went all to hell, and it became a complete train wreck. So to put it in simpler terms, we look for three things. Number one, basic reading ability. Number two, interpreting what you read. And in a band situation, of course, that brings in using your ears as well as your eyes. And then the third one that was really the most important one of all was one's improvisatory ability, how they played fills, how they again, led the band in or brought the band down. Mm-hmm. So those three areas, there were some people who came in who made reading mistakes all over, but who led the band and who improvised in such a way as what they improvised sounded like part of the chart, not a fill that somebody had learned out of a textbook. So that was basically the whole thing. And another strength of having all those bands was that a lot of time the folks who were in lower bands could come in and listen to the rehearsals.
Yes, they were open rehearsals.
Yeah, and learn from that as well. And of course, the more you expose yourself to it, the more you listen to it, not only within the school environment, but listening to CDs of the basic stylistic characteristics of the music, knowing Basie, knowing Woody, knowing Duke, and that sort of thing. Well, then, that was all there for you if you were willing to take advantage of it. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It definitely, for me, it was a wake-up call because I came in with a basic skill set and I could read, but I know one of the things that I needed to change, that it was like, the frying pan over the head hitting, is laser-like focus. Mm-hmm. Not just phoning it in. And the first, I believe it was, if you hadn't yet made it into a lab band, then you would start with that reading exercise that was literally just drum set.
Yeah, of course.
It was the big rehearsal room, and it was 3 or 4 of you at the table, and then there's a drum set quite a ways away.
Yeah.
And so it meant that you couldn't fake it. You couldn't just play by ear and listen.
Yeah.
And you had to, like you're saying, leading all those things. And I remember my first semester, I didn't make a jazz band. Mm-hmm. And I know what happened. I know I had missed a line, just with my reading. Mm-hmm. Again, not Eye of the Tiger, laser beam focus. I missed a line because I remember I finished and you were all sitting there like, "Oh, you're done?" I said, "Yes, I'm done." They're like, "I guess you're done." And I looked back because we could keep the music we read, and I kept every single one. Mm-hmm. I still have in my notebook because it's your handwriting. Uh-huh. But that really kind of snapped me out of, boy, I just need to be on the ball. I can't fake this.
Well, I'll tell you something that I probably never told you. I knew that you had what it was going to take to get into the program, first of all, and then excel in it. And that was because of the way I first met you. I was in my studio and I heard this very loud knock on the door.
Oh, boy.
And I opened the door and there you were, and there was a young man with you whose name I don't remember. Yeah. And it was like, "Hi, I'm Maria." And I was like, "Whoa, okay." and it was immediately, you demonstrated self-confidence, which most incoming freshmen don't have.
Mm-hmm. Well, that may have been a facade.
Well, that's all right. It's a good facade to have. Yeah. But at any rate, you were assertive, and that's so important because it means that if you're assertive in that situation, you're going to be assertive in a learning situation too. You're not going to be afraid to ask questions. And that's one of the hardest things about teaching is when you have a student who, for one reason or another, never comes out of his or her shell and never asks questions. Or I've had students where I've deliberately just played as badly as I can, which is pretty easy to do, and then say, "What'd you think of that?" And they'd say, "Oh, man, that sounded great." And I said, "Really? For sure?" "Well, and eventually I said, "Look, if I sound bad, you tell me I sound bad, because I'm going to tell you if you sound bad." Mm-hmm. Two-way street. And if we don't establish ourselves as equals in that respect, then nothing's going to happen. You know,
Yeah.
so I didn't foresee any problems like that with you.
Well, I was so excited to be there. I mean, I was on cloud nine because I wanted to learn from the best and I wanted to be able to play music and I loved it. And I think a friend of mine who was a recent graduate recommended that. He told me, "Oh, this person's a great guy. They're very approachable. Say hello, tell them you know me," to that. And I went around and I introduced myself to Fred Hamilton and Dan Hurley
Hmm.
and even Neil.
Uh-huh.
It was very important to me. And I think that also dispelled a common myth about North Texas being cold. That's the thing
Oh,
is, oh, it's so competitive and cold. And it felt like this small town where everybody knows everybody.
yeah, of course.
Um,
It's a
yeah.
community. It's a
So yeah,
community.
I do remember knocking on your door and going, "Oh gosh," I'm like interrupting his lesson. But yeah, going back to those audition processes, so the first level of just playing alone on the drum set, I think is a new experience for some people because when they're reading charts, they're used to following. And like you
Yeah.
said, you're looking for someone who's leading
Hmm.
rather than following. And
Hmm.
it's just you and the chart, no bass, no piano, no horns.
Yeah.
So again, so that's what that just having to do that is a wonderful growing experience.
Sure.
The fact that auditions happened every semester, there was no guarantee when you got in a chair that you were going to stay there.
Right.
There actually wasn't a guarantee that you were going to stay there throughout the semester. Neil Slater, I remember he had a saying, "Every day is an audition."
Right.
And
Right.
I still take that to heart. I
Yeah.
still take that to heart because when I play, I think, boy, a Christian McBride could be in town walking in the door saying, "I want to
Right.
play with that drummer." You know, you never know.
Right.
The other thing is talking about opportunity. So that first semester, I didn't make a band, but I had opportunity to grow because I knew, all right, I got 3 months to get my butt in gear to
Hmm.
fix what it was I did wrong. The next semester, I was in a band. I
Hmm.
think I was in the 7. Next
Hmm.
semester, I was in the 3
Hmm.
or 4, and then I was in the 2.
Hmm.
And I even got to sub in the 1. So
Hmm.
I was able, because I had that opportunity, because not getting in wasn't a life sentence. It was like, okay, I got to keep going.
Good.
And it's a great lesson for life.
Hmm.
Both the just got to try harder and the just because you've made it doesn't mean you're going to stay,
That's
doesn't mean
right.
you're going to stay on top.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of us grew tremendously simply from the rigors of the audition process.
Well, it was always amazing to me, first of all, the incredible responsibility one feels for taking over people's lives and preparing them for a lifetime career
Hmm.
or basically helping them realize their potential.
Yeah,
They people come in and well, all I can say is that when they come in as young adults and leave as old adults,
hmm,
that transformation in that 4 years is just absolutely amazing. Not only in terms of what they do musically,
hmm,
how they progress, but how they progress as people too.
yeah,
And it's very rewarding. And at the same time, you realize that the reason can happen is because of the environment that they're.
exactly.
Yeah, that is what the whole program is about: realizing yourself as well as your potential as a musician.
Yeah, I've recently heard in one of my programs I've been a part of about self improvement, or if you want to learn or master something, there's 3 elements that are required.
Hmm.
One is the information, the education.
Hmm.
2 is the accountability,
Hmm.
having some way to be accountable, whether it's, with a mentor or something, some kind of a test, check in. And then
Hmm.
it's community.
Yeah.
And if you have all those, granted, you can have subcategories, but I think back, that's exactly what North Texas had.
Yeah, and I'll add on one more category, which I think is very, very relevant today, um, given that the digital revolution has given some people the impression that they can achieve mastery in the, in a split second because everything else is so easily accessible.
Mm-hmm.
So I would stress to my students that the most important virtue that they needed to have for themselves was patience.
Patience, yes.
They wanted it so fast, and some of them would get so discouraged when they came in after a week to practice their stuff. They came in and it wasn't happening. And all I would say is it is happening. It's transforming. You just don't know it. Every time you work on something, you're making progress if you do it thoughtfully and honestly.
Mm-hmm.
And you just have to resign yourself to the fact that this is a process that you're never going to be done with.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So instilling a sense of patience, it frees up someone so much. It takes such unrealistic responsibilities off of anxieties. And the bottom line being, yeah, you get 4 years, you get a degree. But when you go out, you don't walk into a club and walk up to a band leader and say, here's my degree, hire me, like you do in many other fields.
Mm-hmm.
And you have to prove what you can do. And the beauty of it is it's a career and an artistic form that allows you to continue to grow for as long as you can play.
Mm-hmm. I know I was definitely in that category.
Mm-hmm.
I remember you having to calm me down because in the beginning, yeah, I was so anxious to just get in there. I remember the very first semester. I just think back, oh my gosh. I asked you if you do lessons on the side. I remember I said, do you ever take students? And you were just like, okay, let's take a step back. You were and you were talking about patience, you'll get there. And I think you applauded me for my desire to do that. But yeah, it's difficult. There's that saying, comparison is the root of all discontent.
Mm-hmm.
I think back, we would all study the 1:00 recordings from the decades.
Yeah.
And I'd look at people like Gray Bissonette, who I think was in the 1:00 his freshman year,
Mm-hmm.
listening to him playing Steve Owens' I Got What. And when I was 19, I was nowhere close to that kind of skill set. Or I'd look at Peter Erskine when he was first in the Kenton band.
Mm-hmm.
He was still a teenager, I believe. And
well, yeah, he was 14, I think, when he first would go to the Kenton camps and sit in with the band. Yeah.
And granted, I mean, there was still a lot of growth that they experienced after that,
sure.
But it was very difficult. And with that school, you had phenomenal people who showed up with great skill.
Uh-huh.
And of course, it didn't mean that they didn't have more to learn. So I definitely experienced that, and I know you had to give me several kind of calm down, be patient, let it happen. Exactly. So moving on to lessons. In other interviews, you've talked a lot about your philosophy with how you teach lessons. And when I think about some of my biggest takeaways, when people say, well, what's it like studying with Ed? One of the big things is I have very little recollection of you ever teaching me licks or chops. It was never, like I had said earlier, the YouTube video of, okay, today's lesson is right, left, kick, right, kick, left, right, kick. Okay, now we're going to do that slow to fast. We might have a discussion if we're listening to a player or playing a classic song. You'd say, hey, well, Tony, on this one, he would do this on the turnaround. Work that up. That would be a cool thing for you. And that would probably be the extent of it.
Mm-hmm.
But I know what you instilled in me, and I know there's probably more to this, but the big picture is learn the history, the lineage, and the language.
Mm-hmm.
Have an awareness of all things that are happening in the music. Really opening up your ears and your mind. Mm-hmm. The big thing for me, I think this was my biggest challenge, was breaking habits and habitual playing. Because we as drummers, we're pattern players. When we learn our first comping patterns, we tend to just then repeat those comping patterns. And then, so being intentional for all that you do. And that was
There you,
difficult.
there you go.
A common thing you do in lessons. So most of the time we'd be playing with Abersols or other recordings. You'd stop the recording and you'd say, "Why did you do that? What? Why did you hit the cymbal right there?" And it would just really bother me, even though I knew you were trying to get it out, because I wanted to say, because I felt like it, man. Because the music moved me. That's what we do. I felt like playing the cymbal, and you're like, "Yeah, but why did you feel like playing the cymbal there?"
Hmm.
I don't know. It was like that. And I used to walk away going, he's taking away music is about, doing what you feel and all that. But I know what you were looking for was, okay, why did I feel like doing it? Because it was the end of the phrase, because I was marking something in the form,
Hmm.
because the piano player was starting to play very percussively and I was echoing that,
Hmm.
or because the music was swelling, so I was swelling. And the thing was, that's probably what I was doing and responding to, but
Hmm.
I couldn't articulate it.
Hmm.
And so pulling that out of me, I remember that was often frustrating. And then I
Oh,
and then I got it, because it really did. It really opened up my ears to not only what's going on, but why I'm doing what I'm doing.
sure.
And it was starting to break me of the habits of, well, I always do this. And then at this part, I always do that.
Yeah. Very
I
strange.
think of Adam Nussbaum did a clinic one of my first years, and he talked about that. He talked
Hmm.
about listening to himself and realizing he had a habit of doing the same thing in his comping. Do, yacht, goo. He'd hit rim and then cymbal, but dig a dig a dig do, bliat, boom. He caught himself doing that, so he had to work really hard
Hmm.
to do that. And I remember that was a big challenge for me,
Yeah.
working through that.
Big challenge for everybody. It's a challenge for me. I have a lot of sessions here at the house, and I it's good for me because I say, "Damn it, Soph, I know what you're going to do. Don't do it," and I'll do it. And it's you become so familiar with your vocabulary that you learn how to change it.
Yeah.
And that's the big thing is self awareness, and you can't be self aware until you've gotten the mechanical challenge of mechanical challenges of the instrument out of the
Hmm.
way. And some people think, well, you just can't listen to yourself when you play. And I said, no, that's another whole world of coordination is being able to listen on 3 or 4 different levels to
Hmm.
where you have the whole rhythm section in your ear, but you still have presence of yourself, and but not to the point that you only listen to yourself. Obviously, I tell my students now that the only time you should be aware of yourself solely is if you really played something wrong,
Sure.
and it breaks the whole fabric of the group.
Hmm.
But yeah, self-awareness is one of the last things I think that comes. And once that happens, then just as you in your own example, that's when you really start to find what everybody supposedly is looking for, which is their voice.
Hmm.
Yeah. We all have voices right from the very beginning, just like a child does.
Sure.
But to grow our vocabulary on the instrument, we have to be aware of what we can already do and not use the same things in all situations, just like you don't use the same words in every social situation.
Hmm.
Really simple. And
Yeah.
the intention is
Hmm.
know where you're going, have a reason for it, because
Exactly.
the horn soloist does. Well, everybody else in the band, they're not playing beat by beat. Yeah.
Hmm. Yeah. I think another way you transformed my playing was, for lack of a better term, you unlocked me. Meaning, like,
Mhm.
instead of just, okay, I'm laying down the time and this is that, kind
Mhm.
of, in a way, letting that go and always responding to what the rest of the band is doing.
Oh yeah.
That means you don't have to play time the whole time. Doesn't
Yeah.
mean everyone's going nuts and just, going wacko. And that goes back to that rhythm section masterclass.
Hmm.
It prevented me from, like, we had a predetermined way we were going to play this. Days of Wine and Roses. I always play it like this. I love this song. And it really changed to, I can't wait to hear what I'm going to play.
There you go.
Can't wait to
Yeah,
hear what the band's going to play.
there you
Um,
go.
and that was, I talk about transformation. That's how it changed. It changed
Hmm.
my playing. And then I knew there is a time when you gotta lay it down. You gotta play in that drumistic style.
Hmm.
But when it comes to improvisation, being conversational, that was a huge, huge change in my playing.
Hmm.
So thinking about your studio, so what types of students were the ones who succeeded in your studio? Because I know there were some great players who did not succeed. They did not grow. They were often frustrated, or perhaps even dropped out. But what traits did your students have? The ones that you would say were most successful?
Well, I first have to qualify success, because if a person is happy with the way they play, that's success.
True.
And if a person accepts where they are in whatever hierarchy there is and is doing what they do well, that's success. And I say this because I have some folks who were not 1 o'clock drummers necessarily, and that are even in the top third of that echelon of players, who are very successful in other fields, but who still play.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the first things I learned was that I went and came in there teaching, saying, by God, I'm going to make every one of my students the greatest drummer in the world. And then I realized, boy, that's some egotistical stuff, man. I said, no, just everybody realize their potential. That's the bottom line. And the tools for realizing your potential were very simple, really. And number one is not being afraid to find out what you don't know,
Mm-hmm.
and welcoming what you can't do. And those two things, that kind of mindset, opened up people to their potential. And some people had more potential, however you want to put it. I mean, you have, say, just to use an example, a person like Carlock, who is, at the top of his game in the music biz. But then you have a fellow who is one of the top neurosurgeons in Houston,
Mm-hmm.
who posts more about Facebook of him playing weekend jazz gigs. He's not
Mm-hmm.
posting about, here's my latest surgery.
Yeah.
But you see what I mean? It's all relative. And uh, I mean, all the students that I still am aware of that went through that program, and there's so many, they're all still playing.
Mm-hmm.
And they all have a community of people they play with. What more could you want?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And if you get rid of this what basically, when a student comes in, and I actually had, what's your ambition? I want to be on the cover of Modern Drummer. And I said, okay, if you're good enough and you've got, the right skills, you might do that. But that's not what I'm going to teach you for.
Mm-hmm.
That's and I leave it at that. And then later on they'll come back and say, boy, that was really stupid of me to say that. What? I said, that's part of growing up. Come
Mm-hmm.
on. I felt the same way when I was your age. So yeah, just basically doing what you do because it gives you pleasure and it gives other people pleasure.
Mm-hmm.
Whether it's a 10 million seat Coliseum or a 50 table jazz club, it's that simple.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's about your quality of life.
Yeah.
And your drumming is part of your life. It might be what you do for a living, that's fine, and it might be what you don't do for a living. I can't tell you how many doctors and lawyers and real estate agents, all successful in their field, are all still playing drums. And to me, that's perfect. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
beautiful. And So not all of these people had the same thing in common. Is that it was that they dropped their defenses,
Mm-hmm.
as everybody has when they come in, and trusted me
Trust,
and
yeah.
trusted the programs and did what they did the best they could.
Mm-hmm. I did see the ones who struggled the most were the ones who weren't willing to change.
Well, of course.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I had a friend who I think did maybe one semester with you and said, well, Soph wants me to change what I'm doing with my right cymbal, and I've always done this way. I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to keep doing it the way I'm doing it. And to me, that's an example of, well, growth requires change. You know,
Yeah.
if you focus on results, you won't see change. But if you focus
Mhm.
on change, you'll see results.
Yeah.
And I think about how, and it was frustrating, but again, I had that trust. You deconstructed some areas of my technique. You changed my ride cymbal technique.
Hmm.
You changed my whole bass drum pedal setup and the way I played it, and I felt like a beginner again.
Yeah.
But because I did stick with it, you know, I got caught up fairly quick, and then I was fluid. I was better because of the different technique. And
Hmm.
I think if I said, well, forget that, this is the way I play, I don't think
Hmm.
I would have lasted in your studio for one thing, but I would have kept hitting the walls I was hitting.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah. I think the hardest thing is when you have somebody whom you know has potential, but who builds this fortress around themselves,
yeah,
and students who would actually get so upset because I would, in a nice way. I mean, I can be a nasty guy too if I had. I can be good cop, bad cop,
oh sure,
but you know, deconstructing somebody and saying, you got to trust me. You don't trust me, don't come here. But I'm not going to show you anything that's going to make you sound worse.
mm-hmm.
And I had people who would just, they literally get angry. They just could not take it. It was a psychological problem.
Mm-hmm.
Just couldn't take any sort of criticism.
Yeah,
And I had people like that on very high levels. And I had people like that who were, you know, beginners in the program. And that was always frustrating. And they would not last in the program. They would leave because they just was also, they perceived anything that was construed as constructive criticism. They thought that was personal attack.
mm-hmm.
Very sad. Very sad.
Yeah. Well, I would like to talk about girls in the program.
Hmm.
For lack of a better word, and I don't know if people don't like the term girls or young women, ladies. I just say I'm a girl. I was a girl in the program, so I'm just going to use the term girls in the program. And I'm
Sure.
curious about the history of girls who are jazz majors, drum set majors, because so I was there in the mid 90s, and I was, for the time being, I was really the only one.
Hmm.
That fall of 94 when I got there, there was another girl. I was thinking about her and trying to remember her name. But she was playing in the 4 o'clock band. And
Oh,
I remember being so excited because people are telling me, oh yeah, there's this girl. She's killer. She's kicking all the guys' butts. She's a wonderful player. She was great. But she unfortunately blew out her shoulder. I believe she was playing with a band called Bass X. That was a Dallas band. She injured her shoulder hauling gear and unfortunately could no longer play. I don't remember her name,
I don't have any memory at all of
but so yes, I stuck out like a sore thumb.
that.
But you know, that's what my whole life had been, being a drummer and being in
Hmm.
music programs. I come from a family of 6 kids. I'm the youngest of 6 and the only girl. So I was a tomboy growing up, always into sports. So I was used to that environment.
Hmm.
It didn't faze me. The thing that bothered me was when people would have to make a deal about it. Oh, you're good for a girl. Oh, I
Yeah.
never had a girl do that. Oh, wow, it's cool playing with a girl. It's like, can you just use that sentence and take out the for a girl part? Can you say, it's cool playing with you? Can you say, wow, you're in this. But I'm just curious. So I was in your studio. How throughout the years, I mean, can you count on your hand other drum set jazz majors who've gone through your studio?
No, maybe two or three others,
Uh-huh.
I think. And then a lot of ladies from the percussion area,
Yes, percussion majors.
and like Shi Wu, the great,
Excuse me. Yeah.
she took, uh, and they were all. I mean, from my standpoint, I made a drummer is a drummer, period.
Yes.
And I never thought the fact that I was teaching a lady, I taught ladies the same way I taught men.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't see that oh she's a good little drummer. Oh man, pie in the face, pal. Boom.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not a no, I never understood that, and I never hopefully treated any students like that because
No, I
I
I
was never
never
I'm never a patriarchal teacher. Let's
sure.
put it
No,
right.
I never felt, of course. Well, actually, I think I did watch some other videos. So we would record all of our lessons.
Uh-huh.
And I didn't see you. I never felt like you were treating me any differently. I never felt like you went lighter on me.
Oh God, no.
You may have been more polite with your holding bodily functions or whatnot around me, but I think Rich Matulett, he borrowed one of my tapes to record a lesson, and so I was watching his lesson. And I was listening to your feedback from it, and it was like, no, you treated me the same. You didn't hold back.
No.
There were times when you had to lay into me when you felt like I wasn't, when I needed to, get off my duff a little bit more.
Mhm.
But you always treated me with the utmost respect, and I appreciate that. But no, it is interesting because looking at that program, the alumni events that have happened, with these monumental years, and I
Mhm.
see these lab band alumni concerts that were posted, and I looked, and it just really dawned on me. I thought, where are the women?
Mhm.
Where are the women on there? And
Mhm.
Edith Schneer is saxophone player. She's sax prof at University of Oregon, and
Mhm.
she and I will cross paths every once in a while. We were doing a Women in Jazz Day at Central Washington University and doing a
Mhm.
panel. And we were talking about that, and her time was fine. She really enjoyed her time. In my opinion, great players are gonna, accelerate, and she was a great
Mhm.
player. But we've talked about that, and we thought, why not at Jen? Why not have a women alumni, a North Texas alumni group?
Mhm.
And I happened to be in an elevator with Alan at the Gen conference this year, and I mentioned that to him, and he said, "Yeah, and go for it."
Mhm.
But yeah, I
Yeah,
never wanted to be singled out.
sure.
But as I'm getting older, I am understanding the importance of being a role model for young girls who might have felt more marginalized than I did. I am taking more pride in my accomplishments. And I was asking Alan, I said, well, so I subbed in the 1 o'clock for a week when I was in the two. Rich
Mhm.
Matulett was the 1 o'clock drummer. He had to go to a wedding. So I got to sub for a week. And I said, has a girl ever sat in that chair? And he said, not to my knowledge. So that's one of the things that I take pride in. No, I didn't make the band, but I was subbing in the band. And I think, well, if nothing else, I could put that, notch on my belt that I could walk away and be proud of.
Sure. Sure. It's definitely changed. Do you know Colleen Clark?
I know the name. I
Yeah.
haven't met her.
She got her doctorate at North Texas in
Did
jazz studies.
she studied with you?
Yeah, and she had one semester with me, then I retired. So
Uh,
then she finished her degree up with Quincy Davis, who's
mm-hmm,
now. But she teaches at University of South Carolina in Columbia,
mm-hmm,
and she is doing a lot of things with women in jazz. She has a festival down there,
hmm.
and then I mean people like Terry Lynn Carrington who are
Oh, yeah.
very socially involved, and Allison Miller.
Mm-hmm.
And then a bunch of really young ladies. If you go to Drum Channel, there's always
Yeah.
a lot of young ladies coming up. So I think that stereotype is finally melting.
Hmm.
I sure hope so.
Yeah, definitely. I do a lot of festival judging and adjudication. You know, jazz in the schools is really big up here around Seattle.
Uh-huh.
And so I'm an adjudicator, and over the last couple decades, you see more and more young girls sitting there at the drums, and I just want to say bravo.
Yeah, sure.
Bravo to you. Circling back around to the North Texas, the environment. Like I think of that school, I think of you as being the nucleus, you know, of my education, and then the environment of that school really lent itself, you know, to the opportunity to grow, you
Hmm.
know, as we all do. And I think that's harder to come by these days. I know for me as a teacher, it's hard for me to create, I can't create that environment for my students if I'm just giving them drum set lessons.
Right.
You know, I try to encourage them to get out there and play, you
Hmm.
know, play with people who are better than you.
Hmm.
Well, I would love to talk a little bit about your career
Hmm.
if we can. So, you were lauded so much as a master teacher, and you've had such an influence on so many people as their teacher. I think there's a younger generation that's not aware of how wonderful and phenomenal of a performer you are. And when I look back, I was listening to you before I knew I was listening to you. I had Jamie Abersol recordings, the rhythm section workout, and
Oh
one of
my
the first licks I started playing was one of your licks I heard on that, a stick on stick, get it and da get it and da and da da. And of course, I had Woody Herman's Giant Steps, which I just wore out in high school.
Yeah.
And I didn't know I was listening to you until later when I saw the liner notes. So if someone were to say, "Well, who's Ed Soph? What does he sound like?"
Well, let me think. Yeah, the big band stuff is good. Uh, and for years, and maybe to an extent still now, I was categorized as a big band drummer.
Mm-hmm.
Society likes to stereotype people. But I also have been fortunate to play with some really fine musicians in small group situations too.
Mm-hmm.
And trio that I play in with Stefan Carlson, pianist, and Eddie Gomez, the bassist. Unfortunately, we've not recorded, but we're playing quite a bit before COVID, and that band is anything but a big band approach, as you can imagine. A
Mm-hmm.
fine pianist in Houston named Joe Locascio made a couple of albums with his trio with a really great bassist from Dallas named John Adams, and these are really, really, I think, special recordings because we're not playing standards, we're not playing other people's music. It's all Joe's music, and Joe is a great writer. So I'm
Mm-hmm.
very happy with that. Frankly, I'm just happy to be able to still play. Like I say, doing what I do here at home with the sessions all the time with the students from school, and basically that's just a situation of I'm trying to give them what I was given. I started playing professionally when I was 15 years old
Mm-hmm.
and was told, and playing with much older, really good musicians, and being told I was too loud, I was rushing, I was dragging, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm doing that. I don't think I really, I can't say here's Ed Soph on recording because I consider myself a chameleon. Grady
Mm-hmm.
Tate, whom I'm not comparing myself with, but just as an anecdote, Grady Tate said he loved to do studio work, and somebody said why. He said because I enjoy playing so many different roles,
Mm-hmm.
and in fact, all the great early studio players in New York and Los Angeles were all originally jazz players, and they made it in the studios because they could copy things so easily, whatever the latest musical style was. When commercials sounded like the Tijuana Brass or the Carpenters or Blood, Sweat, and Tears, these guys
Mm-hmm.
could all do that. So that's my feeling too. I like playing in all sorts of different situations, everything from the structure of a big band to playing much freer forms of the music.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and that's why I can teach as I can, is because I have that, and I say it with pride, I have a really
Yeah.
big palette to draw. And the least important part of my life is my career, quite frankly.
Mm-hmm.
It's what I've done, what I've learned in that career that has made me good at relatively good at teaching.
Mm-hmm.
And so I have a if you people are interested, I mean, in this day and age, all they have to do is go on YouTube and they'll find something. And
Mm-hmm.
fortunately, whatever they find will be okay. You know, and nothing of me falling off my drum throne or anything.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't. It's a funny thing. I've had the opportunity to play so much good music, and a lot of that good music has been with people whom people don't know about.
Mm-hmm.
That's the beauty of the music, is that there's so many ways to plug in to great players. And when I say great players, I'm saying, damn, man, why, I never heard of you. And, well, I never heard of you. But, wow, you know. And the thing is, the scene has gotten so, should I say, so narrow. And this isn't a condemnation of anything. It's just that young people gravitate towards whatever is hip or cool at the
Sure.
moment. And by doing that, they may not only miss out of, say, a secondary player like myself, what I've done, or a primary player, be it John Bonham or Elvin Jones or Bernard Purdie or Clyde Stubblefield or any Big Sid Catlett, they miss all that. And through no
Mm-hmm.
fault of their own, even though it's all there. But
Yeah.
but you know, they're all in the moment. I've got a great quote. There's a guy named Timothy Snyder, who's a great historian at Yale, who is writing a lot and is being very vocal about the political scene and the dangers of fascism. He says, quote, "We have been trained by digital media to believe that only what happens right now matters."
Mm.
That's deep. And that's
Yeah.
that's how a lot of young musicians are. Up and coming, full of vim and vigor, but that, then that, then that. And that's why people like yourself are so important, because you can pull them out of that. Just as I had to pull people out and say, hey, take a breath, relax, you're not going to know everything, you know,
Mm-hmm.
and to give them the beauty of the entire spectrum instead of all these little digital algorithmic bites
Mm-hmm.
running past them.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that the digital world is bad. I'm saying how some people use it is dangerous, and not, you know, shuts doors, it doesn't open doors.
If we can chat just a little bit about your personal life. You know, I think about how when we look at someone we admire or a hero, sometimes we think of them as a robot that's just 24/7 only doing the thing that we do. But I know you, what I know of you personally, that you have a very active life
Mhm.
outside, you know, the bandstand. And I heard in one of your recent interviews that people might be surprised that your community, the people you surround yourself with, don't even know that you're a drummer
Right. Yeah.
or don't interact with that side of you. So
Right.
what might be something, if you care to share, what might be something about yourself that might surprise others? Or maybe just
Well,
that fact alone.
yeah, I've become, well, I have to include my wife Carol in this, because really educated me in a lot of ways and made me aware of things that I wasn't aware of. Um, and one of those things is just environmental concerns.
Mm-hmm.
And when we bought our first house, when we moved to Denton, we've never been homeowners before, and we finally could afford a house. And we went to a community meeting at a library, and somebody came just out of the blue came up and said, "Hey, you know they're going to build a copper smelter. Oh, about a mile and a half from where you live." And copper smelter, Carol looks at me and she says, "That means one thing, lead."
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And there was an elementary school downwind from it. So we got involved. I mean, really involved, form a group and everything. And long story short, the company, after we sued and everything else, said, "Okay, we won't do anything that puts lead in the air." So that's fine. So that got us started. And so we're very involved in environmental issues in the community. I serve on a city commission, environmental committee. The bottom line is, if you don't have a healthy world to play in, it's going to be very difficult to play.
Yeah.
And we take a lot for granted, and it's changing very quickly. So I feel that I try to be an example. We were the first house in Denton to have solar panels. Again, Carol.
Good. Mm-hmm.
We have an electric car. We're doing what we can to reduce our carbon footprint. We're vegan because we feel that, number one, just reading the medical studies about what some of this industrial meat can do to you is pretty scary. As much as I loved it, but it was not good for us, and it's not good for the environment because of all the natural habitats that are destroyed to grow cow food. So, all personal decisions which we feel are important because we don't want to be part of the problem. We want to be part of the solution.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, extremely involved in issues in the city, and I mean, a lot of musicians are not like myself. People really wouldn't know that I'm a drummer. They know me more as an environmental advocate. But there are a lot of musicians who are similarly involved in issues like that too. It's just they don't broadcast or put "I am a vegan" on their bass drum head.
Yeah.
So yeah, that to me, I do more environmental work now than I do music work. It's scale has completely. I still play, obviously,
Sure.
but the days of thank God, having to make a living by playing are long gone.
Mm-hmm.
So I can broaden my life, feel like I'm doing something good for the community, and yeah, it's pretty simple. We do Meals on Wheels, and I mean it's nothing that other musicians don't do. It's just they don't tell everybody they do it.
Sure. As we wrap up here, I wonder if you'll indulge me. I would love to do You Were with James Lipton and his Inside the Actors Studio.
Oh wow, that was a great
He does
show.
his 10 questions. So if you indulge me, I would love to do 10 Ed questions. Just answer off the top of your head. I know these are silly, but I'm going to do this with everyone I talk to. So, what is your favorite sound on the drums? What lights your heart up when you hear I have a sound that just makes my heart sing. What's your favorite sound on the drums?
The whole kit played musically.
The whole kit played musically. What's your least favorite sound?
A missed rim shot.
Bingo. Who is your favorite audience member? When that type of person or that one person comes, they're the person you most like to play for. Who's your
Well,
favorite?
my wife.
Your wife.
My wife.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If heaven exists, what musician or composer would you most like to meet?
Bach.
Bach. Wonderful.
Period. Exclamation point.
Yeah.
That's my man.
So today, right now, what are you currently practicing?
I'm
What are you working
practicing.
on?
I, I'm practicing still breaking dependence between my right hand and right foot.
Really? I would think by now you would have figured that out.
Okay.
Yes, it's a
No,
constant
I
struggle.
have notebooks. I didn't have time really to practice like I needed to over the 30 years that I
Hmm.
taught. So I kept notebooks of things that I needed to work
Yeah.
on, and that's what I'm doing now. So, and that's one of them. And with my crazy mind, I've,
Yep.
got some pretty bizarre exercises, but that's what, yeah, right hand, right foot.
Okay. What was the last thing you transcribed?
I haven't transcribed since I was in high school.
Really? Do you like pick things out and say, I'm going to copy exactly what they're doing? Do you like,
If
huh?
I do it by ear. Yeah,
That's surprising. That's surprising.
yeah.
What was the last? I have a piece of music, but I'm going to say drummer. Who was the last drummer you listened to that made you say, yeah?
Let me think who I've been listening to. I guess it would be, I've been listening to a lot of old music. So I was, Zooty Singleton.
Judy Singleton. Okay.
Mhm.
If you could have had a successful career playing any other instrument, what would it be?
Hmm. Uh, Thurbo.
Say that again?
Thurbo. Therbo.
I have
That's
no
the
idea what that is.
great big string instrument that's
Uh huh.
played in Baroque music.
Wow.
Yeah, check it out. Therbo.
I will definitely check it out.
Oh
Maybe
man, it's the hippest thing since sliced bread. Yeah.
I'll record with it on my next studio album. How about that? If you could play a gig tonight with anyone living or dead, who would it be? Your dream gig.
Sonny Rollins.
Sonny Rollins, wonderful. Lastly, is there anyone out there in cyberspace, living or who has passed, who you'd like to thank, who you've never thanked before?
Yeah, Tommy Gwynn, who
Tommy
was my
Gwynn.
teacher
Can
at
you
North
tell us
Texas.
who that is?
He was my teacher at North Texas. And I can
Wonderful.
tell you anecdotes about him. I basically teach, I'm a carbon copy of Tom in a lot of ways.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm distinctly proud of it.
Mm-hmm.
He would, if you played for him, he wouldn't turn to you and say, "Oh, that was pretty nice." He'd say, "God, that stunk,"
Mm-hmm.
and then play it the way it should be, in extremely high standards.
Mm-hmm.
And I would also thank Harry Lance, who led the All City Symphony Orchestra that I played in, because both of these men were not compromisers when it came to playing music well. And I'm so grateful that I saw and learned from people like that who said, if it's the best, it's no good. If
Mm-hmm.
it's not the best, it's no good.
Yeah. Well, wonderful. Well, I want to take the opportunity to thank you. Thank you for doing this interview, but also just a heartfelt thank you for
Oh,
all the
you're,
time you've given me throughout the years, my time in your studio, and you always answer. I've called you, I've texted you. I mean, it's been years, but now with Facebook, it's really, and I appreciate that so much. And even though I have really taken a step back from teaching, I don't teach full time. I make my videos and all that, but I feel the best way that I can honor you and your legacy is to pass on what I've learned from you. And having this conversation with you, I think, is a good start for people who are viewing this and who are going to visit my channel. So,
good. I wish you all the best.
heartfelt thanks. Take care of yourself. Keep fighting the good fight. And
Don't worry.
hopefully, our paths will cross again soon.
I hope so. It'd be great to see you in the real world.
Absolutely. You take care. Tell Carol I said hello.
I will. Stay well.
You too. Bye bye.